Welcome to the Fully Mindful, where we explore what it means to live with intention, creativity, authenticity, and connection. I'm your host, Melissa Chareau, mindfulness and breathwork facilitator, neurodivergent lawyer and coach, and fellow human navigating this wild and beautiful ride we call life. On this podcast, we dive deep with interviews featuring inspiring guests, share solo mini episodes packed with guided mindfulness practices to help you center and thrive, and mix things up with tangents and sidebars, where my friend and fellow podcaster Debbie Harrell from the New World Normal joins me for some real, random, and meaningful conversations. So if you're ready to pause, reflect, and expand, you're in the right place. Let's get fully mindful.
So much about our experience of being in relationship to our feelings is that either we over-identify them, it's this sort of self-referential, that's the bad person because I feel guilty or I feel angry or whatever emotion that we've really said is that makes me bad. The body allows for self-awareness, curiosity, and neutrality. Just the sensation.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Fully Mindful, where we explore all the things that make us tick, the ways our beautiful and sometimes crazy minds work, how we can access inner wisdom, uncover our worth, and explore our purpose or purposes in life. Today, a treat. I talk with Kristin Taylor, a life and executive coach drawing on 20 years of counseling and coaching, and who draws out amazing insights in her clients with gentle but powerful inquiry and mindfulness. Once a highly sensitive child herself, she learned how to see and experience the world, and how to use this sensitivity and empathy to heal both herself and help others heal themselves. We nerd out on mindfulness, self-compassion, and Kristin even shares some of the somatic techniques she uses that brings us into equilibrium and allow us to explore further if we want, or just be in the moment. You'll want to listen to it all, and most certainly, you'll want to check out her podcast too, which is called How I Made It Through. And here we go with Kristin Taylor. Well, hello everyone. This is Melissa with the Fully Mindful. And I don't know, I'm super excited because the guest I have here today is someone I've known for many years in a weird sort of way, and we'll get into that. But I've known her since middle school. Her name is Kristin Taylor. She is a life and an executive coach. She brings over 20 years of counseling and coaching experience and blends elements of one of my favorite topics, neuroscience, nervous system and emotional regulation, also near and dear to my heart, mindfulness, also near and dear to my heart, and psychology into her approach. She relies heavily on the teaching of self-compassion. She specializes in working with people who are experiencing unwelcome levels of stress and anxiety and long to put fear in the backseat of their lives rather than the driver's seat. Kristin also hosts a podcast, which you absolutely have to listen to, called How I Made It Through. And that podcast, How I Made It Through, shares stories of finding oneself and greater purpose in the midst of the aftermath or challenge of adversity and difficult experiences, and are offered as inspiration and encouragement while normalizing the mental health struggles so many of us navigate. I would argue pretty much if you're a human, that's who you are. So anyway, that's a big introduction to Kristin Taylor. Welcome.
Thank you so much. What I appreciated in you saying that, Melissa, is I'm thinking of me and my podcast. Someone hands me something to read and I'm like, Kristin Taylor grew up, and you made it sound like you were actually just saying it off the cuff, and it was really natural, and you sound really cool. So thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Well, and I appreciate that, because it can be, people forget, like, we sound all natural on these podcasts, but the truth is, I get a little sweaty under the armpits when I start these up.
As do I.
And so, yeah, so it's really awesome to have you here. And I just, a little bit of an explanation. I think I was saying in the introduction that we've known each other a really long time, or at least we've been in each out of each other's lives for a long time. So tell us a little bit about that, just so folks have some sense of how we know each other.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because we really didn't know each other. We knew of each other. So
Hmm.
we met in middle school in seventh grade, right? Was it seventh grade?
Eighth grade, yes.
Eighth grade. Okay, eighth grade.
Close enough.
When you came in December.
Hmm.
And it's interesting for those of you listening, I invited Melissa on my podcast. So please, if you do, and I hope you do go to my podcast, look for Melissa's episode. I learned a lot about what that experience was like for you.
Hmm.
But I don't remember everything about childhood, obviously, but there are these moments that I remember. And there are moments, Melissa, that you were in that I remember because of you,
Wow.
because you represented all that I felt that I wasn't and that I wanted to be. And I'm going to quote you because when you were in my episode, you said, when we're continually comparing other people's outsides to our insides, you were that outside. And so remember, we were outside of photography class. And it felt like, because I was so shy, it felt like you really claimed your space in a way that was really obviously noteworthy to me. You looked so confident and outgoing and gregarious and smart, enough that I remembered that for like 40 years.
It's amazing because, all of that, I know what my internal world was, which was terrified to be anywhere. And I was a new kid in town, and I think I learned the skill of bravado because, and you and I have talked about this before, I am at my heart an introvert, and I just pass as an extrovert. Right. And I don't know if you're the same way, or if how you present in the world outside of how I know you, but I think that's probably true. Like we can.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I couldn't then.
Hmm.
It was a hard earned skill. And, it's a skill that takes a lot of energy because I'm very much an introvert. And if I'm in a small enough group or one on one, people are like, you are not an introvert.
Right.
But get me in a big crowd of people, and I am going to disappear.
Mm.
Like that is my default position. And that felt like the position I was in from like nursery school to high school graduation. And it wasn't until in my 20s, and it's interesting things like you and I messaged about this, like waiting tables. That
Hmm.
really helped me.
Yeah.
Positions where I really had to, and I've given this so much thought. And I see my son, who is 14 next week. I see my husband called me yesterday, and I was sharing before we got started that he started football. And he said, I'm really worried. Like, I drove up to football practice and everyone was in groups talking, and Jack was standing by himself.
Mm.
And I said, I know what that's like. He'll find his way. He wants to be there. But like waiting tables, if there is like a rule of engagement, like now I walk up and I engage with you, I know exactly what I'm here to do. It's easy to step into being outgoing.
Hmm.
But if there are loosey goosey rules of engagement, like we're all just kind of milling about before something happens, that's where my anxiety comes up. Like I'm terrible at small talk. It just feels so awkward and forced to me when it's sort of like, hey, like I used to even hate it, like in college or graduate school, there'd be breaks in the middle of a course. And I'm like, oh, can I swear?
Yes.
Oh, shit. Then we're gonna like hang out and, in the hallway, and some people are gonna grab coffee. Like suddenly that shy girl comes up again because
Yeah.
there's a rule of engagement. What is my role? What am I supposed to like, hey, hi? And like, what if they don't hear me? Then I'm awkward and then shame comes and it just throws me right back. Even at the age of 52, like those are things that I still contend with.
Isn't it amazing? Yesterday, my husband and daughter and I were on a walk along the waterfront. I was going back to my Philadelphia waterfront.
Yeah, right along
Uh,
there.
but we were walking along the waterfront and there was some kind of like barbecue or party or something. And it looked like a number of people that weren't necessarily family. They were all just sort of milling about and talking to each other. And I had that, oh my God, like I had that same sense of anxiety, like, wow, I'm sure glad I'm not over there.
Oh,
Like even just witnessing it,
so you
I
did
got nervous. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. And so, but I will tell you, and I'll tell the listeners out there that, when we met back in the eighth grade, I would not have known that about you. To me, it looked like quiet confidence, like somebody who was intentionally hanging back, observing things. And so it's interesting, that we have these internal experiences that are radically different than what other people see. And I think that's so important to remember, whether we're in eighth grade or 52 years old, right?
Mhm.
Is that exact thing that, oh, right, if we can just stop and recognize that our internal experience might be very different than what somebody else's internal experience is, and how that's showing up in how they present themselves to the world.
Exactly. And the beauty of getting older is we're not in that developmental stage of being in eighth grade or high school where you're so self-centered.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's just where you are.
Yeah.
To even allow yourself to recognize that someone is having a vastly different experience, perhaps even belying how they're showing up.
Mm-hmm.
But now it's so nice that even through the practice of mindfulness that you can I'm going to quote you again, quote you quoting Deepak Chopra, are you the thinker or are you the thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
And I was actually in another podcast called Freedom Fridays, where the host was saying, are you having thoughts or are you being had by your thoughts?
Ooh, I like that.
Don't you love that? And I feel like as an adolescent, I was had by my thoughts
Hmm.
constantly. And now the ability to pause and step outside of myself and recognize those thoughts are happening. Those are old tapes, situation differently, or be in this moment with more intentionality.
So where do you think you first experienced that pause, that ability to sort of stand back and have a little bit of space between you and your thoughts? When do you think that first happened for you?
That is such a good question. I don't know off the bat. Give me it's like a therapy question where it's like not a podcast question because I'm like, that might take a good 5 minutes for me to think through. It probably started to happen in graduate school. So I went to graduate school to become a therapist. So it was about examining thoughts and being in therapy. And then it makes me think I'd actually started even earlier. I went into graduate school at 24, but I had started in therapy at a very young age. And again, developmentally, I may not have been able to do it quite as well, but I think the process started to unfold that I began to question things and myself. So there was like the exercising of even having a pause that muscle started to build. But it took a long time though.
Yeah. I'm very envious because I feel like, I swear to you, I feel like even with years and years and years of mindfulness practice under my belt, I really didn't get the pause. I could get it if I was like
Mhm.
meditating, but
Yeah.
I didn't get the experience of that pause in the moment if I was not actively meditating until I think I was like 48 or 49 years old. I mean, it's embarrassing. I really don't think, I mean, that muscle took so long.
Yeah. Well, then, as I listen to you, I may have given myself too much credit. I feel like it's on a spectrum. Like
Mm,
say the muscle started.
yeah.
I don't think I could have given it words or of my own volition. Then like now I'm going to pause. And then I was starting to recognize like I could start to deconstruct my belief systems and my choices. So that to me served as building the muscle. But I actually agree with you. If I'm talking about purely the practice of mindfulness, I've really only been studying mindfulness for about 5 years seriously because it was introduced to me in graduate school, but it didn't stick.
Mm.
And now, all these years later, it's now when I'm like, I think about it, I practice it, and so much that I didn't understand then. Like, I think of all the therapy I had and I've been trained in, so much what of it was about cognition, which is
Right.
important. But boy, oh boy, did it miss the mark. We are, in my opinion, mind, body, and spirit. And I even went to a school that was about transpersonal psychology, which includes the spirit. But maybe it was the program, maybe it was my age, maybe it just I wasn't ready. But so much of that ability to hit the pause button has been around very recently, learning about nervous system regulation so that my body is primed to be able to give me the safety to hit pause. Because if your body, this sort of, the operating system of who we are is our nervous system, you can't outthink when all the 5 alarm fires are going off and just go hit pause, like you're not even in the right part of your brain.
Yes.
So for me, learning techniques and breathing and ways to down regulate that are not just cognitively reframing, coupled with like, oh, I always say this, like it's happening, or I'm whatever it is, I'm pausing enough to go, I'm in distress, I'm caught in a spiral, I'm caught in judgment, just whatever it is to pause that role that we
Hmm.
lost in. That to me is such an important first step. And then it's the nervous system regulation. Then I can do something like practice mindfulness in a safe body. And all the therapy didn't
Ah.
focus on allowing me to be in a safe body.
Let's take a quick break.
Hey, everybody, this is Melissa with the Fully Mindful. It's the new year, and I bet you're feeling the need to unlock your full potential and embrace empowerment, or maybe something completely different. Well, I'm excited to offer a new program with one-on-one breathwork and coaching sessions. We'll embark on a truly transformative journey of self-discovery, combining conscious, connected breathwork and embodiment coaching, and more. So contact me, Melissa, at the Fully Mindful, for your transformative session today. That is so fascinating. As you know, and as my listeners know here, I practice emotional freedom technique, otherwise known as tapping, which is a practice based on Chinese medicine and principles of acupuncture. And basically, one taps on various areas that tap into the body's meridians and can regulate the nervous system. There's a lot more to it, and certainly if people are interested, we can put some stuff in the show notes about it. But it's been my EFT coach, the practitioner I work with, once said to me, I said, well, I don't need to work on that. I've done years of therapy on whatever it was that we were talking about. And she said, well, yeah, I'm sure you have. But how does your body feel about it? How does your nervous system feel about it? I was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I had never thought about that, and there's that wonderful book out there, The Body Keeps the Score, right?
Read it, just read it. Yeah.
And, I mean, probably lots of people have had the experience of, maybe a certain smell or taste or something that they see just takes them back, like literally to a moment in time. And that's our nervous system, right? And
Yes.
so getting, like you said, to that place, like it's all well and good to be cognizant in our brains, in our executive function part of our brains. But when that amygdala, the little fight, flight, freeze, or fuck it sense of our, nervous system gets hit up, we literally have no blood flow to that part
Well,
of our
by the way,
brain.
love that you said we don't have blood flow. Like, I'll say it's offline, but it's literally no blood flow. So when the neuroscientists talk about the importance of regulating the body and the nervous system, 80% of communication, if you're talking about like the super highway of who we are in our operating system, 80% of communication is from the body up the spinal cord to the brain, and only 20% the other way around. But in our society, we've had that reversed. We must stabilize. Like I said, you can't override a body that feels like I'm going to die with a thought like, be courageous, you're good enough, you're smart enough, right? Like, it just doesn't work.
Right. And so, I love law of attraction. I love all that stuff. And I think it's wonderful for people to visualize. But if you're not in a space where you're not in an energy space, in a body space, like you said, it doesn't matter. I don't know if you are aware of this research. I wish I could recall who it was, but I was fascinated by it and just wondered what you thought of it, if you'd seen it. Is there was a woman, I think she was in San Francisco, and was studying kids in, I think, the Tenderloin or somewhere in that area. So an area of the city that is a lot high crime.
Mhm.
And there was also seemingly a high incidence of ADHD. And so as she began to study this, what she found was these kids really didn't have ADHD. What they had was PTSD.
Yes.
And so they weren't able to focus or access their executive function because they were constantly worried about their own safety.
Right. That's exactly. I mean, it's like a hierarchy of need. That is a perfect example of what we're talking about.
Wow. So now you're on this journey where and it sounds like you've been on this journey for many years. You said you started therapy very young. When was the first time you went to therapy? Do
Well,
you
the
remember?
first I do. So I'll just share that I grew up in a very chaotic and often violent home.
Mm.
And so, and I am highly sensitive, and it's an actual label. It's not a diagnosis because it's not like in the DSM, Diagnostic Statistical Manual, but it is a classification of the way one's nervous system is wired. And mine is highly sensitive.
Mm.
So sounds, smells, tastes, noise, emotions, things that other people, like things that are just innocuous to other, can become perceived by my nervous system as a danger cue.
Oh wait, I wish I had my husband in the room and my daughter because last night, I'm just interrupting you. This
Yeah,
is
please.
because,
Please.
and we've talked about this before because we share this sensitivity. And my husband made some microwave popcorn. It burnt for some reason. I kid you not, I smelled burnt popcorn for like 4 hours as if it was underneath my nose. My
Yes,
my husband and daughter were like, "You're crazy, mom."
fine. Yeah, that's how I live. Even things like in two of our bathrooms, the the fan, when
Mhm.
you twist it to turn it off, it gets stuck there. They would leave it going all day long.
Oh my
Like, I
gosh.
can't handle it.
Yeah.
Okay, done. It doesn't bother them. My husband, when he doesn't walk into the house. He opens the garage door. It's like, it doesn't seem to bother anyone else. But I'm like that. There's so many little things.
Right.
So I grew up in a house where I was the only quiet one.
Mm,
And like I said, there was violence.
mm,
And I often was shut down.
mm.
I was either activated and nervous or shut down and depressed.
It's a
And I
survival tactic for you.
it was a survival tactic. And so, like, this will get to therapy. I promise I have not forgotten your question, but like, I just learned this probably in the last couple of years. I was so shy in school. School frightened me because there was so much chaos. Girls were screaming for the sake of screaming. Boys were like heckling for the sake of heckling. There was so much activity and there were so many rules, but I couldn't learn well because I was so much like you're talking about, kids in the Tenderloin. I'm not saying my situation, I'm not comparing it, is what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is I was in a nervous system that was overactivated and unsafe.
Hmm.
And so it's like, this is how you go to the bathroom. This is how you, put your stuff away in a cubby. This is what we're doing, and I would just be so activated. And then often I would pretend that I was sick because I didn't want to go back. So I'm missing school. When I'm there, I'm miserable. What I hadn't learned until a couple of years ago, until my mom told me, is that my first grade teacher asked for a special conference with her where she said, I'm really worried about Kristin. This is not just shy. I'm worried there's something developmentally wrong with her. There's something I've rarely, if ever, have seen this in a child, because I was like frozen.
Yeah.
I was frozen. And so we had this family that was less than functional. I think one of my brothers really acted. So we all have different roles. Like I was the hidden child. Both of my brothers were acting out. One in particular was, through the therapeutic lens, would be considered the identified patient,
Mm-hmm.
right? Things were, he was in trouble with this person or this entity or this authority, or, right? Like he was the one who was having temper tantrums, breaking windows, causing fights. So we went into therapy probably when I was like 9, but it was too young and it didn't last very long. And I remember my brother like raced out of the room and then he was lost and on the street. I mean, it was just like so chaotic. But then there was some substance abuse issues that as a family then brought us all in when I was a teenager. That it was a saving grace. And that is when I started to learn it can feel so torturous to be highly sensitive, especially when you are in an unsafe place.
Mm-hmm.
But the gifts of sensitivity is that I was reading a lot energetically. And I felt like I'd be in the room and people would be talking or fighting or whatever is happening. And I felt like I could go into the head of my mom, my dad, my brothers. I'm like, I know what he's thinking and feeling. I know why this is happening. Like, I may not have been able to put words to it, but I was like, I feel like I have a sixth sense. Like you all are like blind and I see. Why do I get things you guys don't get? And so through therapy, I started to recognize like this is a language. It's like an emotional language that I feel like I'm tapped into in a way I see others struggle. I'm not saying it was easy, but light bulbs started to go off. Like I feel like I get people's motivation. It was empathy. I had this vast well of empathy that I started to recognize not everyone naturally had.
I love that. And I love that your experience of therapy was a positive one. My first experience with therapy was not a positive one. I was probably more like your brother, running out of the room and getting lost. The therapist that I saw was not a good fit, and it actually ended up causing some harm. But most therapy isn't. Most is very positive and gives kids in your situation, like you said, the language and maybe some tools for how to kind of get through everything that you were going through with this chaotic family around you and the chaos of school and being highly sensitive. And
Interesting that you say that though, because I wasn't the identified patient. Like my mom still to this day says you made me look like the perfect mother because I was so quiet and scared. Unlike in comparison, these boys, I mean, that's the language, these boys. And so I was still an observer. No one paid attention to me. And I didn't talk much because I was such a good girl. And so I, again, was watching things unfold and I was having these moments of like, I'm getting what, I'm seeing it from the observer's point of view, but I still wasn't really aware of what was going on for me. And I remember, well, I won't go there. I don't want to put anyone in a weird situation, one of my brothers or anything, not that I'm mentioning their names, but basically someone pointed it out to say, Kristin, I see that you're quiet. This is going to come up again. Like you have a lot to say. You have a lot of feelings. He basically called me out on wearing the mask. And I will never forget it because he was so right.
How did that feel when that mask got called out?
Publicly, like in a big setting.
Ooh.
Oh, it was mortifying because was so dead on. I knew he was right, and I knew I was being called out. I didn't hate him, so to speak, in the moment, but I was not pleased.
Yeah.
And I was trying again to be a good girl. I mean, I was really great at people pleasing. I tried to be gracious because I wanted it to stop, but it was painful.
Yeah. So, I mean, at some point, you do take the mask off and you do start self-examining in a way. And was that in graduate school or college where that started to work its way into your life a little more?
I would say college. And it's interesting looking back and being trained as a therapist. I never got licensed and practiced as a licensed therapist, but had lots of practicum and internship and academic and a lot of my own therapy. My first therapist I thought was a good therapist until he became, and now in hindsight, I'm like, he was kind of creepy. There was a real abuse of authority and expertise, and him being a man and older, me being a young woman. But nonetheless, I was making friends with people who were interested in the path of health and healing. And so there was a lot of self inquiry, there was a lot of reading, there were a lot of conversations, there was just a lot more exposure to self awareness.
Mhm.
There's so much more language around it now. Like I was in college in the 90s, there's so much more language. Back then, there wasn't really, it was more like psychotherapy, you know,
Right.
kind of where it stopped, cognitive behavioral therapy, gestalt. Like there were some ways of talking about it, but now it's like you can talk about emotional intelligence, you talk about empathy, you talk about nervous system. Like there's just so much more awareness than there was then. Then I feel like it was a little, talk about Freud and Jung, and then even a little bit about, people experimenting with psychedelics and different states of consciousness. But today it's more part of the common vernacular, which makes it easier to talk about. It was the beginning. It was like a percolating of this is the route I want to be on.
Mhm. Yeah, and then we talk about that on the podcast a lot here is, how did you sort of arrive at what you knew maybe your purpose was, or what you knew what you wanted to do with your life, or had an inkling of that. And it sounds like you were at least starting to have that inkling.
I like that word. There was an inkling.
Yeah.
There was, and the inkling was recognizing, even if I didn't have the word empathy, that I was somehow dialed into people in a way that others weren't. And people naturally came to me, and I was good at listening. And I had insights that felt like, at least often enough, were helpful. And
Hmm.
there was that level of naturally, and I think, it's kind of the way I'm designed. Like I have a soft voice. I co-regulate with people. Like I create safety. I always hear like that. I just feel like there's so much more relaxed when I'm with you. I feel like I can tell you anything. And that's all a wonderful thing. And it made me feel good. Like you want to be needed. And I was like, oh, here's a place I can be needed. But
Hmm.
it also made boundaries super porous and dangerous when I was young. And for a very long time. I mean, that's really something that I'm still working on. Like I have to recognize like I can't rescue people, I can't save people. That's their stuff, this is my stuff, because that's where so much validation was received.
Right. Right. Yeah, they say in some circles, I didn't cause it, I can't control it, and I'm not going to cure it. So they put that. So, yeah. Yeah. I mean, those boundaries are really challenging. And I think, especially in that sort of therapeutic model, whatever model you're using, it does get difficult, right? Because you do get in there with people. You get in that, I don't know what is the appropriate metaphor, but you get in the dirt with them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so how were you able to find, or how have you been, or how are you finding the tools to be able to have that level of empathy that is so healing, but also have boundaries so that even if you get in the dirt, you're not, you don't have to take a shower afterwards. You're not consumed
Yeah.
with it.
Yeah. Well, first was to choose the clientele that I wanted to work with. And I recognized, I was working in my 20s in homeless shelters with kids, and I was working in hospitals with kids and adults. And I was working with low income families who were dealing with a lot of just domestic violence, substance abuse, generational poverty. And I could do it for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And then I worked as a crisis counselor, and I was working with a lot of dual diagnosis, meaning substance abuse and mental health. And I realized that I was straying further and further from what I really wanted to do. And what I really wanted to do was work with sort of what's been called the wounded well, like people who, and we're all the wounded, depending on wellness on the spectrum where we are, people who are invested in personal growth and self-awareness work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I recognize, and that's part of the reason I transitioned out of the licensure route and becoming a therapist. And I was making no money and barely able to survive. So that was a big, big factor as well. But for me now, as a coach, and especially after having a child, like I know I can't work with children. I just cannot. It's too heart-wrenching for me.
Mm-hmm.
I can't work with children. And now as a coach, I can screen and assess people to recognize where my limits are, because I know myself well enough to know that if people are dealing with particular circumstances, that boundary will be very difficult for me. So screening is an important thing. So that's one thing, setting myself up for success. Screening only goes so far because we are all multifaceted, complex people. And so unexpectedly, someone who might appear like, okay, this is probably the direction of the work we'll be doing, will share something very unsettling, upsetting, despairing, anguishing. And so for me, it goes right back to the mindfulness piece and the nervous system regulation. So even in a session, there will be times if what is being shared is personally really distressing or disturbing, do practices to ground myself, to stabilize my nervous system so that I can care for myself first.
Mm-hmm.
I will do it before a session, and I will do it during a session. And then during a session, also, I find comfort in facilitation skills. Like I know, like, okay, we start a meeting, I'm going to have a frame, that's my intention. I'm going to assess, we're going to identify the topic. I know right now, it's almost like that metacognition right now, here is where I am in this space. Here is my role in this space. That to me helps with boundaries as well.
Mm-hmm.
As much as possible, I'm using as much transparency to say, I'm not here to save you. Here's why I asked this question, because when we get out of this meeting, I want you to be able to feel some sense of empowerment in you caring for yourself. What can you do? Like it's all baked into the process that is a reminder to me and the other person. So those are ways like both before and during that I can do it. And there are times, and I'm sure there's more, like we'll hang up from this and I'll go, oh, I should have said that and I should have said that. But off the cuff, there are times where still I'm holding them because I am so heart-centered
Mm-hmm.
that then it's movement. Like I have to get out in nature. I have to move. I might say a prayer for them. I might, do some sort of small little ritual, which is like handing it over to, and this is my spiritual belief, like spirit guides to like, please care for him or her in this way. And please allow me, may I show up in my own sovereignty. And, like I will speak and pray in such a way that keeps that conscious and making me feel not alone in it.
Right.
Also consult with other people. Like, as a coach or a therapist, you have people that you consult with. So it's all of those.
Hey, everybody, if you like this conversation, make sure to rate the show in Apple or Spotify or wherever you are listening so that others can find it and enjoy it too. And if you like the show and want to keep hearing great conversations with really interesting people about how they found their purpose, please donate to the show. Go to thefullymindful.com to donate today. And I mean, those are such wonderful tools, not just as a coach, but I think for just being a human, having the human experience, right? And it does come from that mindfulness because you have to be aware of what is happening in that sort of meta way that that this is what you're experiencing, this is what you're seeing, and to still be connected but not responsible for the other person.
Yes.
And and that is, I mean, the work is, I mean, that is really the work, right? Because
100%.
we can't hold space for somebody else and guide them or be on the path with them if we don't. and and so I think that's just a wonderful way, a reminder of just tools that we can use. And I love how at the end, if you might say a prayer for the person and for yourself.
And for myself.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big shift. That's
Hmm.
a shift. And I'll add to that. I love so much of what you're saying there, Melissa. And what I'll add to that too is in the moment, practice mindfulness with them. Whether it's breathing,
Hmm.
whether it's tuning into emotion, like that it is always not only being talked about, but it's being practiced, it's being modeled, it's calling out that it's being practiced and modeled, that it's making what so much of coaching is having these unique conversations that elevate consciousness, that what is happening between us right now dynamically, we're consciously pointing to and speaking to. So that's mindfulness and sort of in motion.
Right. Do you find, and I don't know how many listeners will know the difference between, and you have this experience, even though you didn't go the licensure route. I mean, you clearly have on the ground experience counseling. What is the difference for you between counseling, therapy, traditional therapy, and coaching, and how that shows up differently?
You're asking the best and the hardest questions. So I know that in the work that I do, I blur the line
Hmm.
of my background, which is why I screen so much, right? I want to make sure that I'm not working with someone who has a history of suicidal ideation, or if they're, in substance abuse issues, that they're in treatment. Like I do a lot of assessing to make sure that they know that. I will say my coaching has a bent in psychology
Hmm.
and is therapeutic in nature. So
Right.
I pull that out. But if I'm taking just myself out of it and saying coaching, coaching is very much like, this is the way I train coaches as well. And I will say one of the most simple ways of thinking about coaching is to say, okay, where are you now? Where do you want to be? How are you going to get there? That is the most simple way of looking at it. And it's very achievement oriented, but
Hmm.
the achievement can be personal insight. And so when I say, where are you now? Where do you want to be? How are you going to get there? It's also saying, who do you know yourself to be and who do you see yourself becoming? Who do you want to become as the vehicle, the number one vehicle to support you achieving whatever outcome it is that you've identified that we are going to be working towards.
Hmm.
Counseling can be a lot more amorphous. It is saying, okay, we're coming together to inquire into personal growth work. We're coming together to ameliorate some of your suffering around depression or anxiety or, couples issues. So it is not as focused. And when I think of how I was trained as a therapist versus how I was trained as a coach, And when I am on the receiving end of both, therapy is a little bit more like, we're going to sit down, like not much of a frame, like, how you doing?
Hmm.
And it's just naturally, let's see what percolates, what happens here. When I am a coach, like I said, I have a very tight framework that is flexible. So the person might not feel like, oh, I know exactly what she's going to ask next, but I know where I am in the coaching process. Am I in assessing? Am I in exploration? Am I in the part where we're discussing? Am I prioritizing? Are we now advancing the conversation? Like, it has that, for me, that container that keeps it more structured and intentional towards an outcome we are both working together to achieve on their behalf.
That's such a wonderful explanation. I have a tendency toward coaching. It's what I like to do, but I've also tend to like that framework better and have always been more interested in getting to a solution, whatever that solution is, and not staying in the problem. And sometimes it's worthwhile. I mean, sometimes we do. Sometimes we definitely need to understand the problem in order to move forward. So therapy is very much necessary in many ways. But I tend to favor the coaching part because to me that's like, all right, here now we're up, we're close to the top of the mountain and we can see that peak and we're so close. And so how are we going to get to that peak so then we can see the whole view?
Yes, yes. Tell me, what what are the gaps that you heard, or your perspective on the difference? Because I always like to hear from people. That's my take. But how do you, if
Hmm.
define those two?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really difficult, and I think the lines are sometimes blurred. And personally, I think that the kind of the model that that you use, particularly because you're trained to in both therapy and coaching, is I think preferred because I think it's really hard to have a hard and fast rule. And a lot of what I've seen out there in the coaching world is this hard and fast rule. Like, if they're talking about the past, that's therapy. You don't have any business talking about that. And I'm like, I don't think it's so clean like that. I don't think you can untether your past from where you are currently. That is why you are the way you are. And so, I mean, I do think coaching is more forward thinking and more forward focused, but it's not and shouldn't be necessarily removed from the past. But I do hear a lot in the coaching world, if you're talking about the past or if you're talking about problems, and don't coach the problem, coach the person. And all of that is true. But for me, I think it's not so black and white. And maybe that's also my experience as I age. What I learn is things are never so black and white.
Not.
Yeah.
There is not. Theoretically, it sounds very clean, very reliable, but then you're sitting with someone,
Mhm.
their relationship with their mother is in the driver's seat. And to not talk about that is not effective in supporting them in the growth that they want to achieve towards the goal they want to achieve.
100%. I mean, I've had people I've been working with who something like that exactly comes up, and maybe the goal of the session was to talk about, I don't know, getting a promotion, let's say, and moving forward with their career, but in the driver's seat is their mom and all the anxiety around their mother and what's happening. And so I think we would be remiss if we ignored that, and we're not really helping people if we do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's just interesting. We're probably nerding out here on coaching and therapy, but I love one of the things that I wanted to get back to. I love that you incorporate mindfulness into your coaching. I mean, you literally are using these practices, and I'm sure it's different for each person and each client, and what works for them and what doesn't. But I love that that's a regular part of your practice and that you model it. So what might be some of the things that you do to sort of interweave mindfulness into a coaching session with somebody?
Melissa, you asked such good questions. Like, let's talk metacognition. I
Hmm.
often to explain what metacognition is, which is so meta, it's hard to describe it. So when it's happening,
Hmm.
and like that's where to me, one of the many important facilitation skills of a coach is transparency. And when I say transparency, it's, as an example, I can say, where were you born? Or I can say, I'm about to ask you where you were born, and here's what I'm thinking when I ask that of you. I'm aware right now that, and I don't know what I might say, but I'm aware right now that my curiosity is leading me there because, like, I'll just use it. And then as I'll use transparency in that way, I'll say, that was an example of metacognition. The curiosity is there to ask you. And then me saying where that's coming from and what I'm noticing in myself. So I'll use even a lot of verbs like I'm wondering or I'm experiencing curiosity. And I'll use that as an opportunity to explain mindfulness. And then if they're talking, it's like the slowing down, say, okay, so you just shared that. Where did you feel that in your body?
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I ask is, and the reason I ask is I feel like this is an opportunity to explain why mindfulness is such a powerful tool right here. So it's always dynamically in play. So everything is a teaching opportunity so that it's not just abstract, but it can be in the moment and relevant to what we're doing. I think that answers your question.
Yeah, no, I love that too. And I do love talking about how people experience things in their body. And I don't know if you've found this, I certainly have, that most people have no idea. And so they really have to stop
Mhm.
and sort of be in their body for a moment to say, and sometimes I don't have to, but I may give them some prompts like, oh, you might be feeling this, in your heart space, or you might feel this in your belly, or, just so that it gives them some option of like, oh, yep, no, no, not there, but over here. Or, you might experience this visually, you might be experiencing like a dark scrambly thing in your brain, or like a red hot thing in your heart, or give them some options. And that is really helpful because so many people, me included, I mean, culturally, that's just what we're taught. Get outside of the
Yep.
body, go right into the head, and and stay out of the body. And I thought that was so interesting because you said that earlier. It was something like 80% comes from the body to the brain and not
Mhm.
the other way around.
Mhm.
And yet, when you ask a client or a friend or a family member, where do you feel that in their body? They're hard pressed. But it's that
Very
first
hard pressed.
introduction into that, oh, what is that? And then I do the same thing where I might explain, well, what I found that is if I can identify what that feeling is in my body, I might feel that again, and then I have a better idea of what that is ahead of time,
I love that.
right? Like,
Yeah.
oh, when I felt that in my heart or in my gut, here's what I was experiencing because we've talked about it in this coaching session. And so when I feel that same exact sensation in my gut, when another situation is happening, I can have more mindfulness about it, right? Because I can recognize it in that moment.
Yes. Yes. I really appreciate that. But that also leads me to think about is you're also helping with their own self-awareness. Like, okay, so if you have that feeling, what are what is or what are some of the names in a nuanced
Mm,
way? Because the emotions can be very, very nuanced. Is it like excited trepidation, or is it like heavy grief, or whatever it is? Is it grief with resentment? Like they can start to say, okay, I recognize that. And also, what I love about the body questions, and this is really where my motivation comes from in a large way when I ask about their body, is that so much about our experience of being in relationship to our feelings is that either we over-identify them, it's this sort of self-referential, that's the bad person because I feel guilty or I feel angry or whatever emotion that we've really said is that makes me bad. That's a bad one. The body allows for self-awareness, curiosity, and neutrality. Just
Mm,
the sensation. Start with sensation, like, is it prickly? Is it thudding? Is it heavy? Is it light? Is it, fleeting? Like what words, what colors, what temperature, right? And then again, if they're not in their body, and a lot of people are not in their body for a number of reasons, one of which is trauma. It's
mhm,
not a place to be, hasn't been historically. Even what you were talking about, like metaphors. Like, what does it look like? What might a metaphor be? If it had a voice, what would it say? Like, there's so many ways to access. I often teach, it's such a big fancy word, adds to my legitimacy, but interoception.
mhm.
Start with just swallow. Close your eyes and swallow. What does it feel like to constrict those muscles, to have saliva move down your throat? Just small ways. Close your eyes and hold out your hands. And you can even kind of wiggle your fingers from the inside out. What does that feel like? And then even mapping,
Mm.
like, okay, I want you to take something soft and from the tips of your toes, just start to touch them while you identify toes, up a foot, ankle, leg. You're just feeling it. Just a connection with the body that is not good, it is not bad. It is just your brain starts to communicate with your body.
I love that. And it also is safe. So while neutral, it's safe. And like you said, a lot of people have trauma and they don't feel safe. So sort of remapping that experience of like this is safe and I'm in a safe place and I'm here right now and it's all right.
Yeah. And so much of what I'm learning too, when I'm learning like polyvagal theory and
Mhm.
learning the nervous system, is to actually, it's almost like muscle testing. So let's say they do some sort of drill, like visualizing their toes and wiggling them, or taking something soft and moving them over their elbows just to connect with parts of their body, just to feel what it feels like from the outside and from the inside. So they go through the drill and then they can move their neck to the right or the left.
Mhm.
If the body and the brain liked it, there will be more range of motion. If it didn't, then it might not be safe to their nervous system. And if it's not, then we do something that is so the nervous system can get safe again. And all of it again is this sense of being in the body and honoring what their brain and their nervous system is experiencing and feeling. When I'm safe, not only do I have this way of sort of testing whether the brain likes it, but then like at this moment, what do you feel? And that's where I will use like the traffic light. I don't know if you ever use the traffic light.
Mhm.
For green, that is when you are ventral vagal. That is when you are in your safe place, you're present, you're connected to yourself, to other people, and joy. And if it had words, it would say, I am.
Mhm.
We all want to be there so badly. I do. Then when you get activated, a little bit of sympathetic activation, and that's yellow. And if it had words, it would say, I have to. And then a red is that dorsal shutdown. And that can feel like depression or overwhelm or burnout. And it says, I can't.
Mhm.
Don't even have, not don't even like it's a judgment, but if they're at a place where language is really difficult to say, how do you feel? Would you say, I'm green, I am? Would you say, I'm yellow, I have to? Or would you say, I can't?
Right.
Understand their own nervous system, of giving some framework and terminology that is a starting place, fundamental place.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I mean, I think it seems like these days, and maybe it's always this way, and we just experiencing it because it's our time, but I think we spend a lot of time, maybe not personally, but just culturally, in the yellow and the red, and especially post-COVID or in the middle of COVID or whatever we're at right now with COVID. I don't know what
Who
this,
knows?
but I feel like a lot of people are in the yellow and the red. I
Right.
hear it a lot.
I agree.
And I really hear a lot of the I just can't.
Mm.
Yeah.
That's Dorset shutdown.
Mhm.
Yeah, which could be another show. But yeah, that's where, you know, oh, I have so much to say around this. The
I
awareness,
know. And
nice. Yeah.
it's amazing that there is so much to say. And, for anyone who's experiencing the red, the I can't, there are a lot of things that we can do to get
Yes.
out of that space and move in, even if we can't get to green right away, we can at least get to yellow.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly. Because the red is so energy sapping, and then the narratives and the belief systems. And then that's again where we start to attach who we are to what we're experiencing. And that's where it can feel so overwhelming and defeating.
Right. It's interesting. I did a little meditation this morning or maybe it was yesterday, I'm not sure, but it was a guided one. And I really like this teacher. His name is Jeff Warren. He's he's out of Canada, and I think he's on the Calm app is where I was listening to him. And he's just lovely, and he has a wonderful way of talking very much like just a regular human and not, some pie in the sky,
Yeah,
so
bodhisattva.
yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah.
he's just a regular human doing human things and he gets it. And so he was talking about like when we notice our brains doing certain things or sensations that we're having while we're meditating, which is a practice, so that when we go out there in real life, that we have some semblance of awareness. And he was saying, well, oh, that's just Jeff doing his thing, and kind of made it like a little bit of a funny, made it something again to de-identify so much with the experience of like literally talking to ourselves in the third person.
Oh, yeah.
Like, oh, that's just Melissa getting spun out again. And then I can have compassion for that Melissa.
Right. Well, they've even done studies about the importance of using your name in the third person
Mhm.
to gain distance or to practice self compassion. It seems so simple and it really works and matters.
Yeah. Well, I know one of the first times I was trying to do like we were talking about meta as in metacognition, but now I'm talking about meta as in METTA, meta, loving kindness meditation. And I remember one of the first times I tried it, and I think it was at Spirit Rock Meditation Center in Marin. And, it was like, oh, start with saying, really nice things to yourself. Like, may I be happy, may I be healthy. And I was like, I mean, if I was trying to do that polyvagal test, my head would have been bone straight. I wouldn't have been able to turn because I didn't believe it.
Your nervous system did not
I
like.
I did not like it. And so I found a really interesting way to trick myself into it, which is that I could do this for people that I loved, and then I could do this for even people I didn't love, which is another interesting thing, right? And so but then I was able to I was at least able to recognize that I'm part of the human race. And so when I did the big, instead, may you be happy, may you be healthy, I did the may we, and I included myself. And I was able to get there that way, right?
You know what? I'm going to steal that because often I work with people where they're like, it's like they have such an adversive, almost like I may throw up if you say that kind of.
Mhm.
That's a really good route because I think so many people are exactly there.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really good. That's really, really good.
Tara Brock does another one where she's just lovely, and she has this practice, I think I'm getting this right, where you have sort of the people in the room with you who have shown kindness to you.
Mhm.
And so you envision them surrounding you, and then they say to you, may you be happy, may you be healthy.
Oh, God, it's powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. It just speaks so much to the conditioned resistance to loving ourselves fully.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's, and I don't know, I've got to get to the point where we're going to talk about your book because I know you're working on a book.
Oh, it's
I hope
really
that's
in
okay if I
infancy.
say that.
It is okay. Yes, it is okay. Again, I think I told you I'm up to page 30, and yes, yeah.
I think it's amazing because I think you have such beautiful things to say about all of this. And I don't know if that's what you're going to be talking about or your own journey or all of it, but
All of it. One day I hope it to be published, and you know, you and I have a conversation about a published book. But yes, it is about the journey of the highly sensitive child.
mm,
But it's thus far, I've mapped it out. Part one is my story, and part two are some of the techniques. And it is also told from a spiritual perspective. There's a lot there that I think some people love, and some people think I am out of my mind, but it is my belief system.
I won't think you're out of your mind, and I want to like pre-order the book.
I'll let any, prospective literary agent know that you say that.
No, it's really true. And for those who haven't checked out your podcast, that's also a wonderful way for, people to really get insight to what you're doing because you invite these beautiful people. I'm not going to include myself. I think I still have imposterism and think you just invited me because you know me. But I'll get over that. I'll work on that. But you invite
We, remember the we.
the we, right? Well, it's really hard because you've had some really amazing people on your show that have talked about really extraordinary circumstances and experiences that they have lived through and have these beautiful insights and experiences, and you draw that out, which is what's so wonderful about your show is that you really draw those stories out of people. And because of your empathetic nature and your sensitivity, like you're so present in
Mm,
those conversations, it really, I mean, sometimes they're, in a beautiful way, difficult to listen to because they're really, I mean, it's real humans saying real things and it's really happening and it's such a beautiful thing. And so, I mean, you've been doing this now for a bit. I'm hoping you're going to continue with the podcast.
I'm gonna switch it a little bit. You'll hear, but I'm switching the platform well, not it's not actually ever so slightly. It actually is pretty fundamentally, so more to come on that. But it still is around extraordinary people
Mhm.
are going through extraordinary things or have gone through extraordinary things. But back to your episode, and it's not to highlight you, but what I love about what happened in that episode, you weren't pointing to like, I fell off a cliff and I'm forever paralyzed from the neck down, right? Or I had a limb removed, or I had heart disease. Like there are some epic stories. It wasn't epic in that way, but it was accessible
Mm.
because I think people can relate to it and say, I may not be currently in the journey of something that a movie could be made out of, but it's the day in, day out that
Mhm.
you speak to that I think deserves attention. And the way you spoke about it provided so much insight and tools that people can start to practice and perspective to consider that may alleviate some of the suffering they're trapped in. So that's why I feel like your episode is so powerful. So,
Oh, you're so kind, and I really appreciate that. And I do think, there's something to that, right? I mean, identification with the issues and the experience and the feelings is so important. And we spend a lot of time in our culture not identifying or walling ourselves off and feeling alone. And so, yeah, yeah.
that's really the crux of it, feeling alone. And to have someone mirror some of their own experiences and maybe put words where they didn't have words and to say, I get that, or I have felt that. that's like the healing balm. That's like the connective tissue
Right.
that I'm hoping people experience in listening to my show, because there are often times where, I have my own medical issues that I deal with that I'm still grieving around, and I have just such a roller coaster ride with. I have good days, I have bad days, and I'm continually learning how to be in relationship with what is that I never would have chosen. And I'll be the first to own when I hear of someone who, quote unquote, has it worse, right? And they're moving through it in a way that looks so graceful. I will go, God, I will again then start to berate my experience and minimize my way of moving through it. And I am working with someone, and he said something to me that was really, really helpful, which was, and this is the spiritual perspective, and I'll shoot out a word here that some people might get, some people might not. But everyone has like a different soul's contract.
Mm.
There are epigenetics involved as well. So who knows generationally some of the wounding that is been triggered through our life circumstances that may not even be ours. And it is all designed as a learning. And to compare one's learning journey against another, we will always win or lose. And it's not about winning or losing. So just for me, just being very, again, compassionate, like we're all trying to learn and heal.
Right.
Stories will show up differently.
I love that. And I think as we sort of wind this up, I mean, that's kind of where I want to leave it a little bit, is like we're all on our own journeys together.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Together, together,
together.
if we are courageous enough to share and listen.
Hmm.
Yeah.
I love that. So, how can people find you if they want to find you? I mean, we've talked about your podcast, but say it again. Tell us where people can find you.
So they can find me, just go to Apple or Spotify. It's on How I Made It Through. They can also go to my website, which is Kristin Taylor Consulting, and Kristin is Kristin. Or they can even email me, Coach Kristin Taylor at gmail.com.
Okay, and I'll make sure to put all this in the show notes. And again, Kristen, I want to thank you so much for a big, heartfelt, really fascinating, heart-opening. You even made me cry at one point. So thank you for that beautiful conversation.
So welcome. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Hey, everybody, if you like this conversation and are looking to align your work and life with your purpose or uncover your purpose in the first place, work with me. I coach people ready to uncover and appreciate their worth, make an impact, and find meaning and purpose in the work they do, whether that's personal or professional work. Get your mind right and make your plan for impact and coach with me. Connect with me for 15 or 20 at the Calendly link in the show notes below and talk about coaching with me. Hey everybody, it's Melissa Chareau with The Fully Mindful, and have quite an episode for you today with Sarah Ariado, author, speaker, mindset coach, and creator of the mindful-based healing program to address the mental and emotional well-being of cancer fighters and their family. It's an amazing conversation. She's super down to earth. One of the best stories I've heard about mindfulness and how she's come to use mindfulness and self-compassion comes out of her relationship with her daughter. It's just extraordinary. And you're going to want to check out the show notes when we're done, because my goodness, she's got an amazing book called Cancer Journey, the Cancer Journey Guidebook, and a whole bunch of cool stuff. And check out below in the show notes how she has a free mindfulness practice just for you. So settle in and enjoy Sarah Ariado. Hey everybody, it's Melissa, and I'm wondering if you all can relate. Have you ever caught yourself procrastinating or maybe doubting your abilities, or maybe you have a black belt inner critic like I do or have had that wants to sabotage your every move with judgment and perfectionism expectations. It might keep you stuck, it might keep you anxious and away from your full potential. The Positive Intelligence Program, PQ, is a powerful 6-week journey designed to help you quiet those saboteurs, embrace positivity, and find flow in your life. Through daily practices and weekly focuses, we'll work together to build your mental fitness. The PQ app will guide you every step of the way and support you, and you'll be supported either by myself in a one-on-one or in a small group of like-minded individuals where you can share insights and progress. So reach out, contact me at info@thefullymindful.com to find out how we can work together one-on-one or in a small group today.